Good morning, everyone. Yes, my name is Kim Cameron. I am from just south of Syracuse in Tully, New York, if any of you know it. I had a lovely drive here this morning, taking the back roads to get here through little villages that I don't think I know anything about. My background for this is I have a PhD in plant physiology, and 5 years ago or so, 4 years ago, I started being concerned about plastics, just like everybody else. And I did the normal thing everyone does. I kind of looked around, what do we do? How much plastic am I actually using? And so I took my scientific approach and I started actually measuring the amount of plastic that I was, every week I would just bring up my little scale and I'd figure out how much plastic I had. And it was remarkably consistent and it was pretty high. I mean, without any work on my part, I was like three quarters of a pound or so, even though I was trying really hard not to use any plastic, and I couldn't get away from it. So that led me to start saying, how do I substitute? What do I do? That led me to Beyond Plastics, which is the organization that I am giving a talk for tonight. And I became interested. I took the Judith Enck, who used to be the director for Region 2 of the what do you call it? Environmental, I can't remember, anyway, it doesn't really matter. But she is extremely well known. Her organization was all about education. And that hit well with me, with my PhD. I took her course. Then I took another course to learn how to speak about this, and ever since then I've been giving talks on this topic all over the country, either on Zoom or in person, and I just have a lot of fun with it. My other side to me is I am president of our local league as well, and I have a vision, and my vision is that the 40 leagues in New York State could become more aware of plastic pollution, and maybe together all 40 of us can think about something that we want to do as kind of a unit about plastic. So we'll start with my topic, which is the road to activism, plastic pollution, and the road to activism. All right, and you might think, why am I doing all this? And the answer to that are these guys. You know, I do some pretty crazy things, all right? I will walk around with that costume on, but really I do it for those little kids over there, because the reality is what's going on in our environment is not going to impact you and I very much. It will impact us a little bit, but the real impact is to those kids. And our world is different today compared to what it was when we were born. I was born in 58, and in 1958 there was no plastic. Some of you might have been born after that. Some of you might have been born before that. But when my grandchildren were born, who are now 5 and 7, there's a lot of plastic. And the road to plastic is just increasing exponentially. So what does that mean? First and foremost, you should walk out of this room realizing that plastic is a hazardous material. It breaks down into small pieces. Those small pieces get into our environment, but it is also full of chemicals that we really don't understand yet. So those are the two things that make plastic a hazardous substance. And when we think about plastic here in the United States, you know, we really don't think about this, right? We see pictures of this. We see pictures of the ocean being full of plastic and the beaches elsewhere being full of plastic. But there are 2 points I want to make here. One of them is this, that 42% of current production of plastic is for packaging. Okay? This is low-hanging fruit. Right? Because packaging is used once and then we throw it away. So, get you in the mindset of, okay, what can we do? packaging is a really low-hanging stuff that we can deal with. But the other thing is, this is what we see. In our country, plastic is nice, neat, tidy. That's what we see. We see it in the grocery store, we see it everywhere, right? And we see it in other places. And we don't even think about it. I have a PhD in plant physiology. Don't ask me to identify a plant. I'm really, really bad at taxonomy. And I'm really good at killing plants. But I also know the nutrients they need and everything else like that. So in farming, we have lots of plastic now. We used to put bales of hay into a barn. Now we wrap them in plastic. And, we put plastic on the soil in order to not only keep the weeds down, but also to make the soil nice and warm so the plants grow quicker and things like that. And seeds. We cover seeds in plastic so that they don't actually start coming out, the roots don't start forming until the temperature is just right. So it's got to break through that barrier. We don't even talk about fertilizer, which is also wrapped in plastic and everything else. So there's a lot of plastic. And unfortunately, research that is being done now indicates that plants can actually uptake plastic. Right? Little tiny, tiny pieces of plastic, we call them microplastics, which are small, but you can see them. But then there are also nanoplastics, which are even smaller pieces of plastic, which are so small we can't see them, but unfortunately they can be taken up by plants through the roots, and they get into the vascular system of the plant. We're also just recently, this year, it's been a long year. This year, we've also had some research that's been done which indicates that microplastics are actually coming into the leaves of the plant through what we call the stomata, which are openings on the leaves of the plant to let air and other gases go in and out of the plant. Well, unfortunately, microplastics are getting in there, and they are being transported again to the vascular tissue. As you can also see, they end up in what we call trichomes, so the little hairs that are on the top of leaves. The problem we have with all of this is not only we eat plants, but other organisms eat plants too. And then we eat the other organisms as well. So there is a real problem when we talk about plastics getting into plants. Plastic breaks down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. As I said, microplastics, which are plastic pieces that we can see, and then nanoplastics can be so small that we can't see them. They are in the air we breathe, they're in the water we drink, they're in their water bottles, whatever, they're everywhere, and they are getting into us. When I first started this work, I could do a search for articles on plastic, and I might get a couple of hundred. I'd go over to Cornell and I could do a search there. Now, thousands. Over the last 5 years, there's been an explosion of research done on plastic, which I will tell you right now is going to be shut down like you have never seen the door close with this administration. So I am apolitical, or I should say I am nonpartisan, but I am very concerned about the closure of research on things that are environmentally important. So, and plastics will be one of them, and there's a reason for that. We'll get there in a minute. But the research is showing that these plastic particles are getting into all parts of our bodies. We don't actually know 100% what they are doing, but we do know that they are causing inflammation and other problems in our bodies. And we know that that's true in animals as well. So one of the questions we might all ask is, all right, where the hell is all this plastic going, right? And I love this image, right? This shows so much, because we all think about the plastic going into the ocean. But those arrows are proportional. And you can see that while we're all directing our attention to the plastic going in the ocean, what we're missing is, where does most of the plastic go? Most of it goes into landfills. We are polluting our land with all of the plastic that we have. Some of it gets incinerated, and some of it it just doesn't get into a system at all. And while we're here, so that we get back to this topic eventually, is where is all the plastic coming from? We talk about recycled plastic. This is a real big, you're now seeing all the time, recycled plastic is great and we're using it and we're getting somewhere. Look at this image. Do you see recycled plastic as being the foundation for the plastic that we're throwing away? No, it's new plastic. So that recycled plastic is actually only a very, very, very small portion of all the plastic being produced today. And that's a really important point. If you listen to advertising, it'll say that it's recycled. Yeah. The reality is it is much cheaper to make virgin plastic than it is to use recycled plastic. And that's just a fundamental rule at this point. And the reality is we are drowning in plastic. And here I have plastic packaging, because this image shows where we have all the landfills in the country. And the red are the open ones, but this is from 2019. Okay, so it's old at this point. But the green are the closed sites. And what you can see down here is 37% of that plastic waste is packaging. We can do something about packaging. We don't have to have plastic in our packaging, or not as much of it. Maybe some of it has to be in our packaging, but not as much of it. And this is a real problem. This article, this came out 2 days ago. So I just added this to my presentation. Literally, the social cost of plastic to the US is in the billions of dollars. Billions. And what we're seeing is disease and mortality from plastic use. It's being associated with heart disease, with cardiovascular, endocrine disruptors. There is a ton of things that plastic is being implemented to be a problem in our systems, in our digestive systems. It's in our lungs, it's in our hearts, it's in our vascular tissue, it's in our brains, unfortunately. It's everywhere. So the largest amount of expense is going to be with disease and mortality. $410 to $930 billion is the estimate associated with that. Look down here at my little landfilling, $2.9 billion. So when I talk about how we're drowning in the waste, well, that's only $2.9 billion worth of problems. But those are the problems that affect us directly, because we live in communities where we have landfills, right? I know we do, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But you can see the rest of it. The loss of marine ecosystem services. Down here in the right-hand corner, sure. There's shipping is $0.91 billion, and fisheries is $0.09 billion. So loss of marine ecosystems, that's going to be the loss of our krill and our fish in our ecosystems around the United States. So this is just for the United States. And I just couldn't help it. But, you know, a billion, what the heck? We talk about billions and trillions now. I was just listening to a podcast the other day. There are 2,000 billionaires in the United States now. None of us are among those billionaires. But what exactly is a billion? And I just decided I wanted to put this up here to make it clear what we're talking about. You know, if you earn $25 an hour and you work 24 hours a day and you work 365 days a year, I'll grant you none of us do any of those things. But if you did, you would earn $219,000 a year. That's it. And then you would have to work for 4,566 years to get to $1 billion. So when we're talking about $410 billion, we're talking about a lot. It's hard for us to consider what this impact is. But it does make us think, okay, let's do something about this. Even if we chop off part of it, we are making a real big difference. But what is this thing that we call plastic? Because we've been talking about how it causes disease, how it is in our environment, it is everywhere, but what is it? Really interestingly enough, if anyone remembers organic chemistry when they were in school, it's just a chain of carbons. It's nothing very fancy in any way, shape, or form, but unfortunately, they're long chains, they're interconnected, they're not even interconnected. They're pushed up against each other. Because if they were interconnected, we wouldn't fall apart like it does. So they're pushed up next to each other and injected between those rows of carbon atoms is chemicals. So plastics can have up to 50% chemical by weight in their plastic. So when you pick up a piece of plastic, you gotta realize that there are a whole bunch of chemicals that go with that plastic. In fact, the number is still counting. Over 16,000 chemicals are added to plastic. Now, most of them are proprietary, so we really don't know what they are. It's the system that we live in. We do know that there are some 24% of those chemicals are chemicals of concern. They are neurotoxins, they are mutagens, they are endocrine disruptors. They are problems for our system, basically. Well, unfortunately, we have almost 50% that we don't know what they are and what their hazard is. So in case you got the idea that maybe we can activate against this, we can do something about it. But while we're talking about this, that cocktail of chemicals, when those carbon chains break apart, they are breaking down to smaller and smaller pieces. Those chop up into smaller pieces, and they're sticky, chemically sticky. And so things stick to them in the environment. So if you imagine them having a water bottle that breaks into small pieces, and those tiny little pieces are now in the soil, well, things in the soil will now associate with that particle. And unfortunately, we have things in our soil, like DDT is still there. I know we haven't used DDT in this country for a long time, but it's still there in the soil. So if a particle happens to be near there, it picks it up and it will associate with that. The particle gets picked up in the air, and then all of a sudden it's now in our atmosphere and could end up anywhere. There are other ones, all these different particles. Some of them you've heard about, BPA. We've heard about BPA bottles, Well, we got rid of BPA in baby bottles. By the way, that's the only place we've gotten rid of BPA, actually, is in baby bottles. The rest of it has been consumer pressure saying, I don't want this stuff in my bottle. And so companies changed their formula and decided not to put BPA into their bottles. They put BPS and BPSH instead, which are substitutes, and they have some of the same chemical properties, but in our country, we don't regulate that. We only regulate one chemical at a time, which might be a slight problem. We could do something about that. But we have all these things that are associating with this plastic debris. And I indicate here endocrine disruptors. Those are basically fake hormones. So they are chemicals which mimic what a hormone will do in our body. Hormones work at very, very low levels of concentration, and they're made in one part of our body, and they're transported throughout our body and used where they need to be used. And unfortunately, when we have endocrine disruptors, they can work in multiple different ways. They can mimic the molecule itself and maybe keep something else from functioning, or they can do lots of different things. We call them disruptors because whatever they are doing, they're messing with the hormonal system that we have. And this is particularly important for our young ones because they are, as they are growing, that is the point of greatest vulnerability to these chemicals, is exposure when they're babies. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the more you have, the worse it is. It's when you are impacted by these chemicals is the important part. Even if they leave your body, which BPA does, after a short period of time, it leaves your body. But if it unfortunately gets into your body at a specific time when a mom is pregnant, then it could impact the fetus as it's growing, that type of thing. So the period of greatest vulnerability is for our young children. One of the chemicals that I'm sure everybody's heard about is Forever Chemicals. Yep, PFAS. These are interesting chemicals. So I talked about that carbon chain, and carbons usually have hydrogens attached to them. That's what's normally in nature, and where just about everything has got carbon with hydrogens attached to it. PFAS is these like an 8-chain carbon molecule that doesn't have hydrogens attached to it, but it has fluorine atoms attached to it. And the carbon-fluorine bond is extremely strong. So every carbon, instead of having 3 hydrogens attached to it, has 3 fluorines attached to it. And this is why it's considered a forever chemical. It doesn't break down in nature at all. It just keeps getting recycled. And you've heard of the carbon cycle when you were going to school, you know, how things form and they end up in the dirt and they end up, we go through a cycle. We go through a water cycle, all these different cycles. Well, there happens to be a PFAS cycle as well. And we're just recycling these chemicals that are associated with plastic in our environment. And the ways that they are associated with plastic is they are instrumental in keeping equipment from being sticky, so materials can move through it very easily. So it's like a coating on maybe a piece of manufacturing equipment. It also is involved in all sorts of things. Unfortunately, it's also in plastic that we put on food, for instance. There'll be a layer of PFAS chemical on it in order to avoid moisture and air getting through the plastic. little things like that. It's just kind of everywhere. And unfortunately, as we started looking for it, we discovered that it's in all of us as well. And that's what the big that is why you've heard so much about PFAS, because it can stay in the body for such a long period of time. And things like firefighters have been exposed to PFAS at much higher levels because firefighting foam is one example of where PFAS is used. I know Micron, I don't know if you guys know about Micron in our area. It's a huge facility that is going to be built. All of their panels that they will have will be coated with PFAS. So one of the questions is, how are you going to get rid of this stuff, without dumping it into the environment? And it's really tough. So that's a PFAS cycle, unfortunately. And just to be, to be as, we'll move into better things in a minute, and I'm really sorry, I know this is really tough, I realize that, but I think there's one last thing that we do need to understand, and that is that this administration is rolling back on a lot of things that the last administration were trying to put into place. Our system of government used to work very slowly and take time. And before President Biden left office, the EPA on April 10th announced drinking water regulations for particular PFAS materials, because unfortunately PFAS is in our drinking water. And those were really, really important. And there were very low levels of PFAS being allowed in our water. Unfortunately, while the top two, PFOA and PFAS, PFOA and PFOS, this current administration agreed to keep those regulations in place, though they've extended businesses' time to actually implement them. But they have kept those levels in place. But the other ones, which are substitutes for other PFAS materials, they have unfortunately rescinded those requirements. So, again, when we talk about activism, let's talk about how we can get this stuff back in place. We had it for a year. Let's get it back. The league is good at doing this kind of stuff, right? And we can speak up about this because these levels should be taken care of. We should have lower levels. The bottom one that you see down there is mixtures. So we run into a situation where PFAS is a whole class of materials, of compounds, and there are different forms of them. Some are 8 carbon, some are 6 carbon, some have chlorine in them, some have other things in them. But our system only usually looks at one chemical at a time. But what the Biden administration was trying to do was looking at mixtures as well and trying to come up with levels that would be acceptable for mixtures. That has been rolled back at this point. What does it all mean? The reality is, we're kind of running an experiment here, not only with our plastic material, but also with the chemicals associated with it. And we're all been exposed, so there is unfortunately no way that we have a control system at this point. The best we can do, and I actually read an article about it just the other day, is I think it's down in New Mexico, there is a professor who has managed to get a hold of brains that have been saved, basically, and he's taken slices out of them to look at the amount of plastic, microplastics and nanoplastics in those brains. And he's able to look at brains from a period of like 2016 and then again in 2020 or something. And there's a much greater increase in the number of plastic particles in the brains in 2020 than there were even in 2016. If you remember, that ramping up of plastic production is real, and so there's more plastic in our environment. Now, I think it was only done on a couple of brains, so that's not, don't take it home. Statistically, they don't have that done yet, but it is an indication that, you know, we're getting more plastic particles in our environment. And as those plastic bottles break down, right, that's creating more plastic particles. And those plastic particles, there is evidence that in our bodies, our body will reject the larger pieces. They will actually just go through our system. If we eat them or drink them or something like that, we'll just poop them out and we'll pee them out. But the smaller particles, the ones that are so small that we can't see them, those are actually getting into our blood, they're moving around, they get into our fat cells, they get into through our blood-brain barrier, and there's real evidence that they're getting into our heart, into our liver, and into the other organs in our body. So, what do we do? You know, we can sit here and think about it. Right? We can be really depressed, and I wouldn't be surprised that it's a normal response to kind of this information. Or we can run, right? Like, I'm getting out of here. I look at that picture and I say, okay, we gotta run. Let's run towards the problem. Let's work at solving the problem. Now, we're not gonna solve it at the national level. Let's be honest, right? This minute, that's not gonna happen. And in this room here, we probably don't have that political power to solve it at the national level. And we have some political power to maybe implement some change at the state level, for sure. But our greatest power is right here in our own community. We can make change here. And the question is, how do we do that, right? That's a real question. So I look at that picture and say, okay, let's run towards the issue. And I think this is a time that also we are lifting the fog. I mean, when I started this like 4 years ago, there were almost no articles about this. There was no research being done. Now there's a ton. Now, with the federal cutback to research, that's going to drop. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But 4 or 5 years ago, it looked like that. That fog looked like that. We didn't understand plastics at all. We didn't understand what was going on. We didn't understand the chemicals associated with it. Over the last few years, I mean, really fast in the scientific world, we have come to understand a lot more about what is going on. Our job is to make sure that that fog doesn't descend again. Because that's the other thing that happens. We have 20-year cycles of knowledge, it seems, in this country. We knew more 20 years ago about some of this stuff than we knew until recently. Because the research started getting done, then things stopped, then things quieted, and then it came out of the public eye and we all forgot about it. And now it's come back up again. And part of our job is to make sure it doesn't go away again. In some ways, you could think that we've kind of poked the bear, but we need to make sure that we can deal with the bear being slightly awoken. So what do I mean about that bear? Well, the bear is the oil and gas industry. It's very simple. Plastic is made by fossil fuels and chemicals. And most plastic today is made from fracked gas. It's made from ethane, which is just a little tiny small molecule, which they used to flare. I mean, Marcellus Shale, when they were fracking, they would just flare this stuff and burn it off. And all of a sudden they realized, wait, we can use this. We can use this to make plastic. So the oil and gas industry's first plan was obviously to use fossil fuels to use fuel, to make gasoline, to make heating oil, you name it, that kind of thing. We still have that, right? But up until recently, the fossil fuel industry was realizing that we were moving away from using fossil fuels for our energy source. It's not quite true right at the moment, but in general, they might have another 10 years on us, but in general, we are moving away from the fossil fuel industry for oil and gas. So they had a plan B, and their plan B is plastics. And even better than that, their plan B is single-use plastic. Because if you think about it, you use it once and you throw it away. It's a very linear system, and you need a new piece of plastic. It's very similar to their old system of you drive your car up to the gas station, you pump it full of gas, you drive around for 300 miles, and what do? You come back and you get more gas. It's the same basic idea, but now it's plastic. And just like oil and gas, when it burns, we create carbon dioxide, and that's a serious problem for our environment. Our plastic waste is a serious problem for our environment as well. And plastic production is growing. I hate to tell you this, but we are one of the largest producers of plastic in the world. We make a lot of plastic. 19% of global plastics in 2019, that number's about the same still. So we make almost a fifth of all the plastic in the world. So, the buck stops kind of with us to some extent. And just to give you an idea, this is a petrochemical complex that opened in 2022 down outside of Pittsburgh. This place is huge. I mean, really huge. I had to go see it for myself. So some girlfriends and I, we drove over to Pittsburgh and I drove around. You can see those train cars. They look like play cars, but they really are that size. This thing is humongous. This opened in 2022. This is a plastic, a plant that makes plastic. And as you can see, they were approved to emit 2.2 million tons of carbon every year just in making the plastic, which, by the way, is extremely energy intensive. And they were able to release 164 tons of pollutants into the atmosphere every year, as well as voltaic organic compounds. Well, they blew through those numbers within the first 2 months of being in operation. They got sued. They've been sued over and over again. And the latest I heard, they're trying to sell the plant. They started in 2022. They got tons of dollars from the community in tax relief, etc., to build it. And now they're going to put it up for sale because Shell will tell you that they don't actually want to be in the plastics industry. This is their only plastics plant. So the reality, though, is if you make plastic, you are releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. You just cannot do it. It is a carbon molecule. It takes energy. You are releasing carbon dioxide, a lot of it. So just take a deep breath, just for a sec. Just relax for a second. I know I've clobbered you at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning on a beautiful day outside. You know, just think about going for a walk in the woods, or maybe taking a canoe ride in your boat or something like that, and think, all right, we'll take stock of what the problem is and what can we do about it. Step one, we are not the problem. And I mean that seriously. Remember the all of us are old enough to know the Keep America Beautiful project. The Tearing Indian, he rides up in his canoe, gets out of his boat, stands beside a road, and somebody throws a McDonald's bag outside at his feet. And a little tear comes down his eye, and he says, it's up to us to keep America beautiful. Putting the onus on us. The problem is us, right? The problem is not us. We are not responsible for the plastic industry's mess. Step one. We are not responsible. And I would hope everybody walks out of here and realizes this was a campaign. This was done by Pepsi. Actually, they paid for this campaign because they wanted to have plastic bottles. Basically. So, put the onus on Americans to teach them how to recycle better. And that's the second part. Those chasing arrows. That was a myth. Right? It does not mean that that item is recyclable. But for years and years and years, we thought it meant that. It doesn't. It usually has a little number in the center. It simply tells the industry what type of plastic it is, because there are all sorts of different types of plastic. And we know that, right? There's soft plastic and hard plastic and plastic, vinyl plastic. There's all sorts of different types of plastic. Well, those numbers in there, the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, you know them all, right? The 1s and 2s can be recycled. The 3s, 4s, and 5s need to be put into your landfill. Well, the reality is there's still debate. We'll say 6% of plastic is actually recycled. Of those are the 1s and 2s. Those are the cleanest plastic. And everybody wants those 1s and 2s to say that they are recycling things. The 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s are mixtures of plastics with mixtures of chemicals in them. And it's like producing soup trying to turn those into something else. Black soup, black plastic, as a matter of fact. You can't recycle them. So when we talk about these companies, putting in recycling material into their plastics now, they're playing a numbers game, and we won't talk about that at the moment, but they're all trying to go after the same plastics, the 1s and the 2s. So we're not expanding the amount that we are actually recycling. And we cannot recycle our way out of this mess. And every single time you hear recycle, you need to think to yourself, wait, no, that's not the answer. The answer is to reduce. Reduce. And if you hear an ad that talks about recycling but doesn't talk about reducing, then we realize that that's probably coming from either the oil and gas industry or the chemical industry. Because recycling allows them, remember that first picture of how much plastic we have? It's new virgin plastic that is used with only a little bit of recycled in there. What we need to do is reduce the amount of plastic.
What's down at the bottom of that triangle? I couldn't read the smaller print.
Dispose. So at the very bottom, obviously, after you've recovered as much as you can, then you do need to dispose of it. But we want to dispose as little of it as possible. I know in Cortland County, we have a landfill. That landfill is filling up 14 years faster than they expect. And what that means is we have $1.2 million that we need to put into capping the current cell and opening a new cell. So this costs dollars to you and me. And I was just on the phone yesterday with Anna Kellis, who is an assembly member for my area, and she was talking about how 15 to 18 years for all of New York State to run out of landfill space. At that point, we're going to have to start trucking this stuff somewhere else. Goodness knows where we're going to truck it. Just to give you an idea. And these are all false solutions. We talk about chemical recycling, incineration, that type of thing. This is just burning plastic. And when we burn plastic, we release into the atmosphere carbon dioxide as well as chemicals. This is not a solution, but it comes under different names. Chemical recycling, incineration, waste to energy, advanced recycling, you name it, they're all the same thing. They're burning plastic, and that is not recycling it. And unfortunately, we're now talking about compostable plastics, voluntary pledges, bioplastics. All of those are great ideas from the industry, but unfortunately, they also all have chemicals associated with them. The compostable plastics can compost, especially usually if it's only in a industrial facility, but they can be composted, but they still release all of those chemicals to the environment. So again, it's not the solution. Bioplastics means that those carbon chains are made from plants instead of being made from oil and gas industry. Again, that's a little bit better, but it's not going to solve the problem. So the real answer, we gotta stop making as much plastic. You know, this says stop making plastic. We can't stop making plastic. We're not gonna stop making plastic. We need plastic. It's a great invention, but we need to stop making as much of this plastic. We gotta change our way of thinking. So what do? You know, we gotta think outside the box. This is kind of a problem, right? What are we gonna do? It's so embedded in our culture at this point, though it wasn't when I was born. Isn't all that long. I mean, I don't know about you, but the 50s don't seem all that long ago. But, you know, step one, think outside the box. We need to change our culture. So if we think about, you know, single-use plastic, it's a very linear process. You make it, you use it, you throw it away, and you hope it disappears. But if we started thinking about a circular economy, then we would be starting to think about how we reuse things and how we can use raw materials and reuse raw materials and turn them into something else. I'm sure all of us have been to secondhand stores and things like that, and sometimes those materials can be reused, etc. We need to think about that for our business world as well. Redesign, reduce, and reuse. And the example I have here is this small company called Cadea. It's really kind of cool. I don't even know if they're even in functioning at the moment, but I believe they are. They are this kiosk that is put into like a warehouse. You go up as a worker, and out comes that metal bottle. You decide what drink flavor you want. You tell it what drink flavor you want. You stick it underneath the spout, and out comes your drink, and with a top, and you drink it, and then you put the bottle back in the kiosk. And there's some mouse in the back of the kiosk that manages to take the bottle and sterilize it, and it's there. It never leaves the site, and so you don't have bottles going back and forth like you do in a regular machine. You don't, the water is already there, and the only thing that's being transported to this kiosk is the drink mix, which is a concentrated mix. So that's an example of kind of changing the idea of how we do business. That eliminates you having to bring all of the cans there, the truck driver, the emissions for the truck driver, you name it, right? You can brighten your mind through it all.
What do they make the outside of the thing with? That's not plastic, is it?
I don't know. It might be. But again, it's not single-use plastic, right? So that repeats, you know, we need plastic. We really need plastic. Oh, hold on one sec, something happened here. Okay. Step 2. We need to join together. One organization on its own is not going to make the change. It's going to have to be lots of groups working together if we want to see a change. So it's so much easier to work on your own. I know. I'm president of my league. It's so much easier. I don't have to listen to anyone else. I can just do something. But I guarantee you that we get better solutions when we all work together. You know, better writing happens, better everything happens when I have 6 brains looking at it, even if we don't agree. But the end product is better. So we need to join forces. We need to pass laws, right? And we need to improve regulations. Here in New York State, we've been working really hard on New York State Packaging Reduction Recycling Infrastructure Act, which the League absolutely supports. I have been to Albany. Interestingly enough, you stand outside the chambers and you hand them your card to ask the assembly members to come out from off the floor to talk to you about these things. I don't hand in my Beyond Plastics card. I handed them my League card because they'll come out to me for the League. Beyond Plastics, they're like, yeah, we know what she wants to talk about. But the League, they're like, oh. So we support this bill. So we can use our good name to our benefit here. You know, but this is a model type bill. Here in New York State, we have all the pieces in our model bill. There is the packaging producers, what they've got to do. Unfortunately, when this was set up, we said to reduce packaging by 50%. Politics got involved. We're down to 30%. The bill is not passed yet. It's passed the Senate twice, but not in the Assembly. So we're down to 30%. Maybe we'll get it passed this year. Also, if we look at the second group, the organization part of it, collect fees from producers. Who's responsible for this stuff? It is not us, the consumer. It is the people who produce the plastic. So they should be the ones to pay some of the cost associated with that. What else can we do? We can enforce these codes. How do we do it? That type of thing. All of that is in this bill, and it is a model bill that is being advertised around the country. Oops, I'm over time, I'm sure. Step 4, bring it home to the community and do things like take action, post all sorts of ideas on the website. And finally, join the mailing list, whatever. Oops, I think I missed one. Yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah. And learn more and become educated and work together in your community to make change happen. I left this up. If you want to take an advocacy training, there was just one. I left this up. There will probably be another one coming up. So that's it, guys. That's what I've got. And I will say, I apologize. I took longer than normal. I apologize. Two things. One, I have a ton of material in the back that's on specifics, like how do you get plastic out of your own life? Because it's really important, right? We're all concerned. about how do you get plastic out of your own life. Lots of material in the back there. Please take whatever you want. Don't worry about taking the last one of any piece of material back there. I also have tons of books if you are interested. I'm a wonk, okay? There are lots and lots of books. And you will find also there's a book list if you just want the book list itself. You can take home a copy of the book list that I've got there as well. And there's obviously more information on Beyond Plastic's website. So with that, I don't see any smiles, but I'm very happy to take any kind of questions that anyone has. Yes?
So what can we do about the plastic that's already in our bodies?
Not much. There's nothing right now that we know of that you can do about that plastic.
Or our children?
Right. All you can do is try to have as little of it as possible in your body. And you can do that, by switching things out, less exposure to plastic. But it is very difficult. I mean, if you eat a piece of fish, you probably have plastic in it. So all you can nip around the edges a bit, and make sure that you change out your plastic containers to glass maybe. Don't microwave, please, for goodness sakes, please don't microwave plastic, especially something that you want to eat. That's really bad. It releases those chemicals, breaks down the plastic. There's a lot of evidence for that, so don't ever microwave plastic. There are other ideas over there. Yeah.
So, you talked about the study, the post-mortem study that this doctor's doing in New Mexico. How do we know that we have plastics in our bodies if that's the only study? Are they blood work?
Oh, no. There have been hundreds and hundreds of studies.
How do they do it? Is it blood work, or how do they?
There is
how
blood
they measure
work.
It?
Yep. They can measure the amount of plastic through blood work now. It is also in other tissue. They can see it. They can see it
So
in
can you ask a doctor to do that for you? Is it that readily available yet?
I don't know that it is that readily available. That's a really good question. I don't know. I do know that in certain studies, like if people live near a plastics factory, for instance, that a lot of those people have been tested. I'm sure that it's their blood that has been tested.
There's universities doing this, or what?
I would think so. I don't have the answers to that, but yes. There are companies that you can send away your water to see if it has PFAS in it, for instance, or any of the other derivatives of PFAS. There are definitely companies that would do that. I'm trying to think of the one that I used just recently. It cost me $70 to send away a water sample, and our well water does not have any PFAS in it, basically. And they tested for 40 different types of PFAS. But so yes, it is. I would love to have a really quick, simple test that everybody could do to find out if they had plastics in them.
If you're saying that it causes disease and mortality, I think there has to be some information about how that's backed up. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. It definitely is. I just don't know how the public can get tested.
Okay.
They can do correlation studies to show that people who have more plastic in their liver have problems with liver. Yeah, that type of thing. Yeah.
So we'll take one more question because we do have a meeting.
Sorry.
Okay, EarthX program, you probably get that also. Features the Netherlands and all of the different things they're doing to make things that used to be made with fossil fuels.
Okay. No, I don't know them, but okay.
Okay, and you use fibers, in other words, fossil fuels are nothing but basically
Carbon.
gas.
Yeah.
It's been packed together for millions of years, and now they're beginning to make all kinds of different things not using fossil fuels.
Right.
I wish I'd taken notes, I've got 5 pages of notes from what you said.
So they're probably using plant-based material.
Yes,
Right, which again, as I said, those are great, they're better, I wouldn't say they're great, they're better, but you still have all of the chemicals that give plastic its characteristics. So, you know, the industry is working to produce better chemicals because the public is now more aware. And again, that's what we need to do, is push to get change made so that the chemicals that are in plastic are better than the ones that they are using. Because if no one's going to complain, they're just going to use what is easiest for them. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's good for us. So,
Could I just make one comment?
A quick one.
I agree with you with regard to all the things that you said, but it's a multi-dimensional solution to a problem. And one of the ones that we didn't talk about too much was consumer demand. And there aren't, in some areas, there aren't a lot of things that you can buy that don't have plastic in it.
Right.
But I think 2 really good examples having to do with consumer demand are metal water bottles.
yes.
You used to see people walking around with plastic water bottles. You go to any gym now, everybody's got a metal water bottle that they use all the time, including me. Reusable grocery bags. And they probably have some sort of plastic in them, but people use them until the bottom falls out.
Right.
So I think that part of what we can do on our level is demand as consumers things like paper garbage can liners instead of plastic ones. So
Exactly.
in any event, that was my only comment.
Exactly,
Thank you
and,
very much.
you know, yeah, and this is an example of packaging. I mean, I got a book in here just the other day. My book came in paper, it didn't come in plastic. Very simple. And so this came from Bookshop, right? So I got my book from Bookshop, but if I bought my book